Hey everyone, welcome to the Just Pick Something podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows. I'm Jakes and I'm here with my podcast co-host Franco.
Hey, what's up?
And I'm laughing. God, I always manage to laugh a lot or giggle way too much when we talk.
You know, someday we'll get the hang of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, isn't that less fun?
Yeah, whatever. So this time we're going to talk about the 2022 film White Noise, directed by Noah Baumbach, adapted from the 1985 novel with the same title by Don DeLito. Baumbach's first directed feature, not to be based on an original story of his own. Stars Adam Driver, Greta Gerwig, Don Cheadle, Andre 3000. So, what did you think about this movie, Franco? I mean, I'll be real, man. I don't think I like this one. This was not
Really?
Yeah, I was not a fan of this one.
I don't know. Maybe I'll be swayed in a specific direction. I think I liked it more than I disliked it currently.
I mean, don't get me wrong, like I got what a lot of it was going for, and at some points I was like kind of lost in what they were trying to do or say, or what this kind of like was trying to come up with an interpretation of this movie. But I just don't think I really liked it, despite me kind of looking things up after the fact and being like, oh, okay, so this is, I guess, what they were trying to go for and talk about or comment on, you know?
Okay, so I have no knowledge of the book.
Me either, actually.
Let's get that clear. I looked up a little bit about the book just to get like what's like a significant change from it, or like, I wonder how similar this specific plot point is, because it mirrors certain things that I want to see if it's real in the book.
I know that the events that happened actually did take place in real life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a train accident or a toxic airborne event that this movie was based off. I think it was loosely based off of this,
Okay.
but it's something like that actually did happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that important to the movie, honestly. It feels like it's secondary. It's like the thing that occurs in the background and affects the characters, but not really. Almost. Is that okay to say? Fair to say about the train derailment?
No. Look. So when I first, without knowing anything about the book, I thought, well, first off, without knowing that it was based off a book.
Right.
If you told me this was an entirely original work, and I had to like interpolate what everything was, I thought that was like the key to this entire movie, was the train, right?
Mm-hmm.
And arguably it's like the second act, what starts the second act, so in like a movie structurally, so it is incredibly integral. But at the same time, it's like the
I guess it's the inciting incident, so yeah, that's true.
But it's, if you had not told me that this was based off a book from like forever ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would have been like, all right, cool, there's this new movie called White Noise from 2022, and here you go, watch it. I would have been like, oh, this is a COVID movie. Got it.
Ah, okay, that's funny.
Because it is literally a scientific disaster that is an airborne pathogen that people get mass hysteria about. They're like, oh, there's misinformation from the government. They know more. They don't know more. They say the symptoms are this. Well, now you're going off of old, outdated symptoms, and you're thinking you have the outdated symptoms, and they're not the symptoms anymore. Oh, now we're stuck in quarantine. Oh, do you think they really care about us? Because if it was really real, then you would see all these news reports about us in quarantine and all about how our situation is going. And then you get the situation of like, oh, well, I've got it now. What does that mean? It's like, oh, well, we don't really know what that means for you getting it until several years from now. We won't really know what that means until we see the long-term effects of it. And so it's just like the fact that it came out last year, I was like, oh, this is a COVID movie. Like, this was very much like all these talking points about this train derailment, the getting affected by it, the way people responded to it. I was like, all of this is There's the whole entire like capitalism aspect to it, like how Americans react to it in terms of like the supermarket, how they move past things for like trivial stuff. It
Yeah.
very much, I was like 100% down with just this whole entire like capitalism angle and COVID angle. And then I found out it was written like 50 years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, are we really that predictable? Are we really that bad?
I mean, okay, it feels like you're right about a lot of that. I didn't really pick up on those themes initially watching this movie. I mean, I picked up on some, like the capitalism thing is really, really, really apparent
Yeah.
by the way they're like interacting with capitalism, all the food and the supermarket, and the medications and the TV. And when the inciting incident does happen, the way they like are treated and all these other things. But man, I just think that like I don't know, something it just didn't really. I feel like I don't really not like, but what this movie is trying to say about all of that just feels like kind of meh. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. I'm still trying to form my thoughts on it, but yeah, I just I wasn't that into it initially, you know?
Yeah, I get that because it's definitely a bizarre film. The only reason I got even close to just like being okay with it, I was like, oh okay. Like the first act is talking about, it's such a weird, pointed criticism of America and like how Americans view things. I was really confused by like a lot of the stuff in terms of like what the main critique of the movie was about. Look, for the first like 10 minutes, I thought it was just critiquing white people.
Well, specifically, what I think this was going for was showing a point in time in American society and how that really hasn't changed dramatically, but also is pretty different. Because, like, this movie feels like it would be taking place in the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
Like, this attitude, at least, like you said, maybe it's just of this white family feeling like, oh, yeah, nothing's gonna happen. Everything's gonna be fine. We don't really have to worry about it. Nothing happens to us. Everything's gonna be okay. This can't be happening to us.
I mean, that happened 2 years ago.
Right, but like at the same time, there's just this feeling of arrogance,
Yeah.
like privileged arrogance that just is projected to me from this family and what they're going through. And not that they deserve the series of events that happens to them, but it just feels like if there was any different perspective in 1980s America, the story would have taken place a lot differently than what we were watching, and I feel like that's part of what they were trying to talk about, was just showing the state of what it felt like to be in this family dynamic structure in the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
Because like I don't know if I would be reacting the same way, but also I currently live a life where I'm used to expecting things to get crazy or the government not to be on top of things or handle things properly, and some of that is probably from COVID, but definitely not what 1980s America probably thought of everything.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, so the first 10 minutes of it, I was like, okay, so the movie's called White Noise. I have no idea what it's about, and it starts with this like diatribe about car crashes in movies, and I'm like, what the heck is this about? And then
Yeah, me too.
but it was Don Cheadle talking, and then it cuts to Adam Driver's character. Adam Driver's character is like the guy when it comes to Hitler, and I was like, oh my God,
Dude, that was so weird. That was so weird.
such a weird choice. And so
he's the professor of Hitler studies. Like, what the fuck is that?
why is this a thing? And it just immediately, as soon as I found that out, I was like, white noise. I was like, oh, is this like a white people thing? And this is not to like go against any white people, obviously, but it's just one of those things where it's like the only people who are like, yo, super pro Hitler are like white people.
See,
or like want to talk about that guy super hard. And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, that's how it used to be anyway. Let's get him.
oh, well, I was gonna say,
it depends. But I'm watching this. I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, oh my god, like white noise. It's just a bunch of like, and it just is, for like the first 10 minutes, aside from the Don Cheadle like monologue, is just a bunch it's just a white family just talking over each other, just nonstop. And I'm like, okay, white noise. Here you go. Here's these white people. This guy who does Hitler studies. There's all this white family in suburbia, no, in academic suburbia, and it's like, oh my god, like what is like? I thought it was a critique on that. Like it was like,
Right.
and it probably is. There's probably some, and that's probably like where the attitude comes from. Like this, like you mentioned, like they're like, oh well, nothing ever happens to us. And Adam Driver says as much. He's like, you never see a professor going on a boat while there's a major flood.
Yeah.
And so the idea that, so I see that, but then it switched as I was like, wait, what are they trying? Like this movie came out last year, so like it's clearly not talking about like. I was like, they're like, what is like the closest thing I could think of to like any of the stuff they're discussing? And I'm like, oh, they're talking about like when there's chaos and stuff, they look towards leaders of certain types of leaders. I'm like, oh, we're talking about Elvis and we're talking about Hitler. I was like, oh, okay, so this is clearly the Trump parallel that we're going
Dude,
with.
they said, I think this is one of the few movies that I don't think I've ever heard the word or the name Hitler said so many times.
Oh my god, so many times. There's so many references to Hitler.
They say it so many times.
And I've never heard anybody like endearingly referred to as like the man about Hitler. Like
Yeah, I mean, not to take away from your like analysis and conveying it to Trump, but like, man, did I one thing that just caught me was just how much this man seems to like revere Hitler, and how the movie doesn't go out of its way to show this as kind of like foolish or like, misplaced, but just a matter of fact that, yeah, of course this guy loves this guy, right? And it just feels like, oh, is this movie talking about like how, without historical context, or maybe in the hands of someone who's directly been affected by tragedy, you're glorifying these things and losing the point of like historical significance of horrible events or something, because the movie, horrible events happen to everyone, and it's not until you're directly affected by it does everyone's perspective on things start to maybe change. But then everything is fine, I guess, or people are like, oh, everything is okay, look, event's over, back to normal life. But then
yeah, it's such a weird, it's so weird.
Yeah, and
the fact that like it literally is like the entire time it's like it's such a weird point to never like challenge a character on, right?
Yeah, and even by like the characters who probably should have challenged the characters on it. Like Don Cheadle's character doesn't seem to be bothered by anything that like his colleague and seemingly best friend loves Hitler so goddamn much.
It's like, I no, it's like he didn't even have a problem with it. He's like, I want to be like how you are with Hitler, but with Elvis. And I'm like, why do you equate these two figures? What is it that we're like? What is the? I'm like, oh my god, I don't understand it. It's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get the idea that this is supposed to be a satire on things, but like, is it supposed to be a satire of one thing or multiple things? And that's the point,
Yeah,
because like,
so I don't know if you looked into the book at all.
I have not.
So the first act, which they mirror the acts in the movie as they do in the book, but the first act apparently is a satire on academia, right?
Which is pretty clear. I think that did come across,
Yeah.
like the professors are professors of nothing. Like,
yeah,
nothing.
They're just showboating. There's like really no substance there.
Yeah, it's just a false intellectualism, right? Like,
yeah, they're like, you're brilliant. I was like, well, you have to be brilliant. Everybody's brilliant. Like, we're all brilliant here.
Yeah, well, one character or one person actually is, and even then she's like, yeah, everyone expects me to be brilliant because I'm a professor of neurochemistry, right?
Yeah.
So,
but no one knows what that means.
yeah, which, I mean, I feel like you can know what that means from the title, right? It's the study of the electrical chemicals that are in someone's brain, right? Like neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, other things.
Yeah.
But they treat it as like this mystifying unknown and compare it to like the other studies, like the study of car crashes.
The man whose whole thing is Hitler. It's a college. There's a whole entire course like that this man teaches that is just Hitler.
Yeah.
What the heck kind of school is it? And you know what kind of school it is? It's a white school.
Yeah, it's not lost on me that his whole classroom people, or the people in his classrooms, are just white people, and they all seem to be there not to like study World War II or the horrible consequences of, you know, the genocide, multiple kinds of people, but just to be like, oh yeah, Hitler, what a great guy.
Oh, so it goes even to the point where one of the students is like, "Oh, can we talk about this plot?" And he's like, "What is a plot? What is a plot if not something that moves towards?" Like, no. What is the plot? What is the actual historical event that this kid has asked you about? Not your like weird professor diatribe about the meaning of words.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of this satire is because of 1980s academia. Like, you know, because it isn't this way at all in current university systems where, you know, everything is hyper focused on putting you in a job, you know? Like even classes you take not to be part of your major still revolve around the idea that eventually you can probably put these skills into the workforce, right? Like you're not going to get a class on car crashes in any probable modern day university system.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, that's the whole thing was just like that's the first act.
Yeah, I guess.
Right, with apparently critique on that. Right, the second act was I can think a whole bunch of things. Like I know they were talking about like it's like a thing about like they're talking about the vacuum simulation people were like a whole entire thing about like how reality is becoming more like a simulation and less like reality, and it's about like the
because I mean the second part starts, I guess, with the actual explosion, the toxic airborne event, right? That triggers this mass evacuation, and it doesn't even trigger it immediately because they're like kind of building up to the fact that I guess, as the title implies, the white noise of it all. There's you know, a smoke alarm going off that no one pays attention to, reports of accidents on the news no one's paying attention to, and then when the actual event does happen, it takes a literal siren and people to leave for everyone to start taking it seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, on the one hand, while I maybe wasn't super into this movie, it was shot beautifully. Like there was some ton of really great scenes and framing of like characters and like moments. This movie looked great.
Cinematography is really good. There was one shot in particular. I was like, oh, that's like their little money shot, which was like one of the daughters looking through like a green
the drawer.
Yeah.
I
was like, they shot that specifically.
Oh yeah, but there was also the shot of like the looming cloud of toxic gas that was over the trail of cars leading to the highway.
Yeah.
Or the shot where Adam Driver's character Jack, the Hitler studies professor, was looking
at the shell.
Yeah. Or looking for the one time where he was looking for that bottle and he had all the trash around him and the camera was like panning upward, kind of like in a circle. Yeah, beautiful cinematography. And yet, even in part two, this movie I feel like still was just like going crazy with what it wanted to talk about.
It was a lot because the second part was a toxic. It was so weird because there's so much in this movie, and I don't think most people would enjoy it. I definitely would recommend it as like a discussion point film more than I would like, oh, you'll definitely like get a kick out of it. It's more of like, oh, you should watch it so that we could like, you know, go over the points bit by bit and like see what you thought about this moment.
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, oh man, didn't you love it when Adam Driver's character and Don Cheadle had like a back and forth monologue about Elvis and Hitler at the exact same time, which was a great scene. It was really well done. It's again so freaking weird, man.
Yeah, and it was really cool the way they were following the characters around and they were going with this back and forth between the two. And it goes with that satire of academia, like everyone's on like just following the words of this like monologue about Hitler. And I'm just like, is no one gonna just say like why this man is just revering this crazy like, Hitler, to the point where it feels absurd? And I guess that's the point of the satire, but still, like, what the fuck?
I think that is the satire of it, where it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna get really into Hitler. It's like, this is weird, guys.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
You're fine. I didn't really have much to say other than like, yeah, it's weird that they focus so much on it.
Well, I mean, part of it feels like, you can continue that idea of satirizing academia by pointing out the fact that there's this reverence coming from like the white teachers and Jack Glandy, I think is his name, Adam Driver's character, and how it feels like his character, as he says in the movie, is obsessed with death. So he's revering Hitler because of the amount of death he caused, but also at that same time, why him, right? Like out of all figures,
I don't know what this movie's trying to go for. Then it also like,
I mean, because there's this whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
it goes like, and then it moves past that, and I'm like, okay, so the main reason I thought it was mostly like a quarantine, like centered film was because the third act kind of like drops all of that stuff and then focuses in on like depression and like the idea of like fearing death and stuff like that, and like taking medication to like combat that and yada yada blah blah blah, right? And like drug addiction and all that stuff. And then there's like a bit at the end about religion and beliefs and stuff like that. And I was like, there's what? Okay, what? Huh? Like, there's consumerism, there's academia, there's religion, there's depression and the medication and the government, and there's so much going on in this movie, and it just doesn't seem to like flow in a way that I feel like is coherent. But like, if you take it into like the umbrella of like America's response to COVID, right? It kind of does kind of stitch itself together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you see, how mundane things were, then there's this major catastrophic event that like screws with everybody's day-to-day lives, and then after the fallout of that and how people's relationships have changed, their mentality, the way that they deal with certain things, the things that come to light after something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, like if you look at it through like the lens of like, you look at it through like the COVID lens, it makes it like a little bit more digestible, right? In my eyes at least. But like, if you just watched it and you didn't have any of that context for like modern day, I feel like this would just be lost on anyone.
I mean, that's fair, but I mean, aside from the COVID comparison, it also just feels like it's trying to like talk about the obsession with capitalism from the 80s, because the book was from the 80s, and like, we're in the point where capitalism has only gotten worse. And right now, I feel like there's very much a discussion happening around the US of people kind of rebelling against capitalism, or trying to say enough's enough. I hate it. I hate capitalism, late stage capitalism. And then in this movie, we get to see how people take comfort in the capitalism of the 80s, right? Like, you have characters talking about how they love the supermarket, or scenes shot in the supermarket showing how capitalism and the products equate safety and comfort and normalcy, right?
Well, I think that was 100% also in line with the COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
Because this conversation about capitalism happened we would all say that like it really started, like it didn't really start until the 2020 election, right? Like Bernie kind of like brought up the topic, and then like COVID kind of dug that thing in, right? Where it was like a lot of people were like, it was a topic for a while, right? But like in the mainstream landscape, right? It was very much like leading up to the 2020 election. It was like, oh, people are like socialist, and that's weird. Like, isn't socialism a bad thing? Socialism, anti-capitalist. What are you talking about? 2020 happened.
I mean, if anything, it was a reaction to being like, man, things really suck. I don't want this to keep being a thing. We should probably do something.
Well, yeah, it was like the way that businesses reacted to COVID, and specifically where like how they treated workers, how the quote unquote inflation, right? I'm not gonna call price gouging by major companies inflation, because we all know what they're doing.
No. Yeah, I know what you're doing with my eggs. You're trying to charge me, saying it's due to inflation pressures. We know you just want more money from eggs. Don't lie.
You're like, oh wait, we realized that you guys are willing to absorb these costs on everything else. We might as well increase the profit, our profit margin on eggs. Not like we're making less chickens.
Cut that shit out.
So like the idea that like It's just like ramped up recently, where it's like that's 100% what this movie is also talking about. Where it's like, yeah, no, the American people find comfort in like in the fucking craziest things, right? We start the movie off with
Yeah.
someone talking about how, oh yeah, the European countries can't frame a car crash the way Americans can. Americans make car crashes look good. Like, these are great things that happen, like amazing optimistic moments. And the first car crash we see is one that starts off this major catastrophic event in this movie, right? And then the next car crash we see is like showing the devastation of that on like people around the, and it's like, oh my god. And only Americans would be like, no, this was really cool though.
Yeah.
It was really well shot.
Yeah, I mean, they even did the whole spectacle thing by showing like amazing cinematography of the resulting
Yeah, like the
effects
lady
of
like
the car
crawling
crash,
on the ground
right?
to like reach for the one thing, and like the kids playing like jacks or something out of like their broken back window.
Uh-huh. Yep.
It's like, what in the world are you guys? Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, if you okay, so this is part of the movie feels like things do tie together, and in a way where it's like trying to tie all the satire together,
Yeah.
and then sometimes it just doesn't feel that way, and it feels very loosely
I
connected.
feel like there's like it is the Charlie Day meme, right? That's this movie. It is so ridiculously scattershot that the only possible connection is just the one thing, right? And if you don't find that one little tiny bit, right? It's like it's all. Forget what's the name of the person again? If it's not all
Pepe Sylvia, or
right?
something.
Then what? Like, there's nothing else that connects all of it, right? It just feels so like just nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like
I mean,
I feel like that's how this movie is.
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Well, I mean, you could possibly say that the whole idea of death and one's identity is kind of runs through this, because you have the start of the movie with the car crashes, then the potential of death with the cataclysmic event of the toxic airborne thing, and then you have the characters having to talk about and deal with like, oh yeah, I fear death. Oh, I also am obsessed with death. I'm the one that fears death. And in how that influences their behavior, and how like the characters are shams of who they actually try to be, all these things. But at the same time, it feels like that's not prevalent enough to be what the movie's about,
Yeah. I thought I was gonna go into a lot more with a bunch of different things, with like the daughter and how she was reacting to certain things, and how the son was acting in regards to like,
man, we haven't even talked about those kids. Those kids are like just nonstop like into something,
Yeah.
like well, the one of them is just obsessed with like scientific facts about chemicals and biology and all these things. The other one is like constantly a detective trying to figure out what's going on, and the other one's just kind of quiet. And yeah, it was a big family, all a lot of talking and dialogue going on at once. I guess part of that white noise.
Stop. Yeah. But yeah, it was. And I was wondering if it was like the white noise was like the stuff. I was trying to figure out what the white noise was referring to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of like make their theory of what it is in regards to like death,
Yeah.
right? Which I guess would be the prevailing theory, because it is talked about throughout all three acts, right? It is death and how that is,
Yeah.
right? But it is a hard movie to get into.
I mean, it was enough in it where I was interested, and I liked to watch it. It's just, it felt like, even though it was probably purposeful with the way it handled its story by feeling kind of chaotic and strung together with all these different themes and satirical elements, but at the same time, it just felt like, I don't know, like a lot of like an endless stream of just different things that it was trying to do. And maybe that's the whole point, because of white noise, just a lot of meaningless, crazy information or something. But I don't know, it's just something about this movie just didn't connect with me in a way where I would be like, oh yeah, I can't wait to watch this movie again, or ooh, I can't wait to dive into what this movie could actually be about.
I mean, I think I do like that I like discussion around media.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
So like I would be interested in that, right? Like I'm having fun talking about it here,
I
right?
am as
I
well.
was
Yeah.
I was talking with someone the other day where I hate lazy media critique and like consumption,
Hmm.
which is like I found recently is like very popular. And a good example of it is I don't know if you've watched it yet
Mm.
or if you plan on watching it, but the Velma show, right?
Oh, yeah. That okay. If you want to take a tangent and talk about that, I would love to because I haven't watched the show, but I am so annoyed at the way that the internet obsessed with this show.
So, okay, so real quick tangent. I was watching Velma and I'm like, wow, this show is not great. It doesn't do things very well. It does a lot of things very sloppily. And I'll continue watching it because like there are like aspects of it that I think are like clever and fun and like I'll enjoy as it goes on. But like right now, not great. First 2 episodes, you don't got your groove on anyway. Usually your worst 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
So I watched that, and when those first 2 episodes dropped, I swear every single bit of critique following regarding the show has been the exact same. Which is to say, they watched the first episode and only the first episode and garnered all of their critiques and all of their issues with the show from that one episode, maybe the second episode too,
Yeah.
and have said, this is a blanket. Here you go. Here's how bad this show is. It is bad because it makes fun of adults who like animation.
Yeah.
I was like, isn't that like a 30-second joke in like the first episode and like
Yeah.
never ever referred to ever again in the entirety of the series? It was like, well, if it's a show for adults, why would they make fun of people who watch cartoons? I was like, they do it in all adult cartoons.
They pretty much do, and I agree with you on like every point practically. I mean, the thing that gets me about it is like two things, right? One, didn't we already go through this with other stuff and kind of just not learned a lesson about jumping on a hate bandwagon of something that just came out? You know, like was that really necessary? And of all shows, this one, like
I think it was very much like I don't know. It's like it was a weird, easy target,
I mean, yeah,
right? I felt like that from everybody's critique. I was like, you guys are making the exact same critiques on the exact same points for the exact 2 episodes. Not even 3, 4, not 5, 6, not 7, 8, 1, 2. The first 2 episodes,
yeah.
right? You're making the exact same points in every single video. And I have to imagine just talking about this was like, here you go. Here's a quick video that I could churn out to meet my monthly quota of videos for YouTube.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that, but it's like I could like if so, I'm not gonna link anybody because that'd be a dick move, right? But I was like, if I could list, I would list off right now at least like a dozen people where they're like, hey, I made the same joke about like, oh, did you guys see the joke that they made at the beginning of Velma episode 1 about how every CW show basically starts with like a bunch of excessive sexual content and then they never do it again, and then all the cartoon girls were naked and that's super uncomfortable? I was like, yes, we all saw it. Every single person has made that critique. They never do it ever again in the series. They never over-sexualize these cartoon characters again. They did exactly what they said they were doing, the same way Riverdale did it, like they mentioned in the show. It's like, it was a bad joke, and we get it.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't land when we saw it on the TV show. It's not, your critique on the bad joke is bad critique. It doesn't tell me anything more than what I already knew. Right?
Yeah, plus also like this is kind of just reinforcing the fact that people, our studios, can make really bad quality shows,
Yeah.
shows of bad quality, and put them out, and people will love it even if they hate it because it makes people talk about it. And like instead of people just being like, oh yeah, that show, you know, it decided being an easy target, I'm just not going to watch or talk about it because I don't want the show to keep going. And instead, people love to do that stuff, and we're probably gonna get another season of Velma, even though
I think they said they confirmed a season 2 because
well, there you go.
the hate watching numbers are so high.
Yeah.
I'm one of the people who's like, you know what? I don't mind that Shaggy's black because that's not like a key aspect of his personality.
Yeah, I mean, me
Like-
either.
It's like, oh, you're really mad that Fred is a rich, privileged asshole. Oh no, like he's only ever been just like a random white guy ever before who wears an ascot. Like,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to the fandom of the Scooby-Doo series, like I would understand them being a little like, oh man, they took my beloved characters and changed them to make them like mean-spirited jokes about, because it feels like a attack on their fandom or their like love of this series. But at the same time, if this show had come out and no one watched it and it would have died, then that would have been it, you know? Like that's all.
Yeah.
But instead people saw this easy target and made a huge amount of like stir and videos about, and now it's become a thing that will continue, and the very thing that's possible the fandom just didn't want to see will continue to be a thing because it worked, you know? It brought in viewers.
yeah, we're talking about, okay, so we talk about White Noise, which is a movie that
Yeah, I saw that. Well, yeah, which is a shame because, you know, I don't think it deserves it. I didn't like the movie, but I don't think it was bad.
apparently a lot of people did not like, right? Like it doesn't have a favorable score. It has like maybe like a 60, right? In terms of like IMDb on like Rotten Tomatoes. Who cares, right? Like all those aggregate score places, like don't rate it
Yeah.
highly. Well, I could get my freaking Rotten Tomatoes diatribe any day. But
Yep.
you know, no one's talking about White Noise today, right? It's whatever. Who cares? Even though there's a
Yeah.
huge plot point where one of the guys is obsessed with Hitler, you would think people would be complaining about White Noise a lot more than they are, right? But guess what? It wasn't an easy target. No one talked about it. It faded out of existence, basically, right? But Velma comes, easy target, and so it's like, wow, that thing blew up, and now we're getting a second season. We ain't getting no White Noise 2. I mean, there's nowhere to go for that movie, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's
No,
not.
for sure. But okay, I think let's tie this all back. But what are your final thoughts on White Noise, man?
Okay, you can cut the Velma stuff. It's fine. I don't need anybody talking about Velma with me.
No, it's all right. It's about 30-30 for both.
Okay. My final thoughts on White Noise. I think the movie is messy. It is very, very well executed messy. It's a very good, very well polished messy. Like the actors are great, the writing is really good, and the presentation is very well shot. But at the end of the day, it's like it doesn't work as like a coherent story unless you like really try to like make it fit together. And I think I did a really good job of like putting in like modern day Americana culture and like late stage capitalism, post COVID reaction kind of stuff with it.
Yeah.
But like even then, when you attach all that theming, I feel like it still feels like a stretch, if that makes sense. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, because I mean, for me, I didn't really immediately draw a connection to COVID, even though after what you've said, I can definitely see that point of view. I mean, for me, I think I was just trying to like connect the ideas of like death and how people, and the characters at least, interact and are affected by their ideas of death, and are obsessed with trying to find a way to stop being obsessed with death, almost, because we didn't really go into it that much, but I don't think there's that much of a need, like in the third act where we find out more about Babette, his wife, and how she starts taking meds and part of this experimental shady clinical trial to treat death anxieties and all these things. So like death was a huge part of this movie, and the topics and themes of death and how these characters interact with them. But I just kind of wish they had went about it a little bit differently if that was going to be their main through line of the plot of the movie, which they didn't end up doing. And it felt more like a series of satirical like commentary on certain things that were all kind of independent but also tied into each other a little bit. I think you're right, as I would say this movie felt very messy. I didn't really like it that much, but I don't think it was a bad movie by any means. And I would probably tell someone to check it out, but it probably won't be their favorite movie of the year.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think it landed very highly for me personally. I will say, look, okay, yeah.
I mean, hey, great song at the end.
Yeah.
Love Wonderful song. I'm super into it.
Yeah, I think other than that, I think we're all good. Don't watch Velma. I don't think it's worth it. You definitely don't need to. We don't need to talk about it ever again.
Yeah, sounds good.
And yeah, that's I think that's a wrap.
All right, cool. With that, thank you for listening or watching this episode of the Just Pick Something podcast. I'm Jakes. That's my co-host Franco. Let us know your thoughts. If you want to send us your opinions, you can send it to an email. We will check it and answer any questions we get. But we have been pretty sporadic lately. But if you still want to send it, just comment. Send us an email at jpspmailbag@gmail.com. It takes us a while to respond.
Like, share, subscribe.
Like this video, share it, talk about it with your friends. What else do people do? Comment on it.
Click the little bell for notifications.
But yeah, thank you for listening. This episode's intro and outro song is VHS Dreams by Sean Ivers. Link in the description. Thank you for listening, and until next time.